Good afternoon, you wonderful people. We are here with a commentary video on this wonderful thing I just found on Facebook. God help us all. Basically, it is from a socialist, Marxist site on Facebook called Fight the Patriarchy, which I don't follow, but I'm in several groups that monitor people like this and pages like this. And they post them in several groups that I'm in order to laugh at them. I don't think cis white guys realize how much power they can shift in a conversation just by casually telling their friends, "That's fucked up, man," when someone says something bigoted. Yeah. To which I wrote, "Oh yay! The fraudulent diversity and inclusion crowd's endless quest to manipulate everyone else into thinking, speaking, and behaving exactly as they do continues. Because they failed to understand the meaning of either of those two words, but intentionally choose to use them as euphemistic buzzwords, because they know that those pleasant-sounding words appeal to people more than the words which actually and accurately describe their end goals, which is the oppressed versus oppressor narrative that is the fundamental foundation of Marxism. With it, of course, authoritarianism, where we have the authority and everyone else can go fuck themselves, which is what they want, censorship, and corruption. So I responded to it, "Let me put on my surprise face." As I was scrolling down to view more comments, here we go. Same with white people when we hear racism. Bitch, do not presume to speak on behalf of all white people. Fuck you. Something I've thought about recently is that as a white woman, oh Lord, I'm positioned with one foot in the oppressor category and one foot in the oppressed category. The only thing you're oppressed by is your own stupidity. Therefore, I can empathize with the oppressed because of my womanhood, oh good God, yet also be allowed into privileged spaces because of my whiteness. I lived the first 3 years of my life in a car, in the mountains, around LA, in the Angeles National Forest, just north of LA, because my parents, who were generally good people, but incredibly, breathtakingly irresponsible, decided that it would be a good idea that because they couldn't afford an apartment and they couldn't afford a home, and my dad, who I loved very much, but had his issues, kept getting fired from jobs, they decided the way that they were going to deal with that is instead of my dad trying to correct the flaws in his character and in his work ethic in order to do better, instead, they were going to beat the system by not having to pay for housing, so they're going to live in a car. Which is what they did, which is why we spent the good portion of the first 3 years of my life living in a car in the mountains. After that, I lived for a year in McLaren Hall, which used to be in El Monte, California. It was shut down by the state, finally. It essentially amounted to a state-run juvenile detention facility. I was 4 years old for the year I was there. Because the LA foster care and adoption system just does not know what to do with all of these kids. Because government doesn't know how to handle these things correctly. So anyway, I was there for a year, and then I got sent to an orphanage in Pasadena where I lived for 3 years. That was all before the age of 7. Okay? And then I was adopted out and was raised for 11 years by an adopted mother and adopted father, okay, where my adopted father was a very good man who tried his damnedest to work 60, 70 hours a week to provide for both me and my adopted mother, who had zero appreciation for any of his efforts, constantly behaved as if she was somehow getting the shaft. She did work, she was a hairdresser, but the attitude was the issue. And I learned to recognize that bad attitude at a very early age, between 7 and 18. And so when I see it in other people, that entitlement attitude, I recognize it on the spot. This is being written by a person who has clearly never suffered any real, actual, hard adversity, but is lecturing everyone else about how things either should be, or are, or whatever, when they have an idea about any of this. I don't know this person, but I can tell by the way they're writing this stuff that they have no clue how the real world works. I will tell you how the real world works. Because I know. Because I've been there. White privilege is bullshit. I grew up with people of every race and gender and whatever. After I was adopted, my adopted parents sent me to a very expensive, at the time it was $6,000 a year, now it's over 20, private high school in Sherman Oaks, California, which is a nicer area of the San Fernando Valley, in Los Angeles. And I went to school with Filipino families and Japanese families and white families and several black kids and all kinds of other stuff. And I knew a black kid who was a good friend of mine whose mother worked 4 jobs to put him through that school. And I also knew a black girl whose parents were lawyers, had a ton of money. She grew up to become a lawyer. She's never known poverty a day in her life. I grew up with Hollywood people. I grew up with all different kinds of people. Where you come from and what you're born into is not an excuse for your behavior. It's not a rationalization for your behavior. It's just what you were born into. Who you become and who you are as a person and what kind of character you have is your fault. Based on decisions throughout your life that you've made and circumstances you've experienced. You sit there writing something like this. I believe it's really people like me, people with a leg in each category. You're not oppressed. White women, queer men, men of color. Yeah, okay. Who can do the most to make changes? Straight cis white males have the ultimate power. Fuck you! You lying ass motherfucker! I have no power. Never have. Over anyone or anything except me. The only power that anyone has over anyone else is that which the receiving person who is subject to that power chooses to give the person who has the power. Which at any time, they can stop choosing to give to that person, say no, and choose to be their own independently minded individual. Which is what I've tried to spend my life doing. Straight cis white males have the ultimate power, but they do not have the empathy factor. Like I said, it doesn't matter what you look like. I've known black people whose parents worked 4 jobs to put their kids through school, through private school, so that they didn't have to grow up in the ghetto and deal with all of that shit. I am friends with people, currently, who grew up in the ghetto, and their parents used the proceeds of certain illegal sales to pay for their kids to put them through private. I happen to be friends with people who come from those kinds of backgrounds. You have control over your own life, unless you choose to let other people have control over your life. And if you're complaining about other people having control over your life, or that you feel you have control over other people's life, you're a moron. If you choose to let other people get into your head, whip you up into a frenzy, into thinking and believing stuff that isn't true, that's your fault. Most people grow out of this phase about halfway through their lives. Not everybody, unfortunately, which explains the Democrat Party, but most people grow out of this shit. Usually, not always, usually, frequently, when they have kids of their own and suddenly realize it's not all about them. The moment you realize that it's not all about you is when you grow the hell up. And that happens at a different place of life for everybody. Clearly hasn't happened to this one. Straight cis white males have the ultimate power, but they do not have the empathy factor. Yeah. I have no empathy for people who think like you, because you haven't been on this earth long enough yet to understand that this is all bullshit. They can sympathize, but they'll never know how it feels to be categorically oppressed. You're not fucking oppressed. Cut the bullshit. You're writing things like this because you think it makes you look good to other people who happen to think like you because they're equally stupid, and you're trying to impress them. That's all this is. They are too far removed from the trenches. Bitch, I lived in a car. And 2 orphanages, so to speak. Whereas we can use our hybrid status to bridge the gap between the oppressors and the oppressed. The only thing oppressing you is your own stupidity. Anyway, feel free to disagree. Oh, you bet your ass. I'd hope if anyone does disagree, they could do so civilly. You know what? I am going to click on the replies and see how this went. Oh boy! The first comment. I see the intelligent discussion was too much to ask of some people. Laugh reacts do nothing to challenge my position.
Man, this is some bullshit!
There is nothing that I could say to this person that would help them to grasp the tiny bubble in which they live and the breathtaking level of inexperience and ignorance that they possess about everything and everyone around them. How do I know? Because I used to think like this when I was a kid. Life's not fair. Life's not fair. My entire childhood was filled with me bitching that life wasn't fair. And you know what? It ain't fair. And it's never gonna be. Ever. Life is a competition. Oh, I know that doesn't sound nice, especially to the feminists. Life is a competition. You can get mad all you want to, but that's reality. The real kicker is the part at the end. I'd love to hear opinions. No, you wouldn't. If I was to give this woman my opinion, she'd lose her goddamn mind. I can think off the top of my head of at least 10, 11 people. Their life experience directly counters this narrative. She wouldn't listen to any of that because this is what she chooses to believe because the media tells her that this is what it is. This is the acceptable position. Fuck your fraudulent narrative. Appreciate you coming along. We will see you in the next one.